Okay, Tuesday edition of the After Show. Got Wink and Justice with you. Wink over here on the East Coast.
And Justice on the West Coast. It is Red Sky at Morning Tuesdays on the After Show. That's right. If you see a red sky in your horizon, it could mean, maybe some orange Cheeto has been, fragments of it that have been spewed in the upper atmosphere from, I don't know. It's like when a giant hollow statue falls to the ground, it throws up a lot of dust.
Yeah. Yep.
So yes, that indeed could be why you have a red sky at Morning Tuesday. So be forewarned.
Right.
And,
indeed. Yeah,
we got that out of the way. How are you doing, Wink?
Not bad. Not bad. It is a 62. 62 degrees. I guess it's partly sunny, partly cloudy. And it's going to be one of those. I think we're going to get up to about 66, 67. So this is pretty much it for the day. Reminder to get in the chat. Just go to netrootsradio.com. Scroll down the bottom of the page, and on the right-hand side of the bottom of the page, there is a link to the chat. So click that and join us there.
And while you're down at the bottom of the page, just to the left of the chat room link is the donate and contribute button. But I got to tell you, before you even get to the bottom of the page, when you first open the page, there's a get out the vote link there.
Oh, yeah. Heck yeah.
Artistically placed, by the way. So I would say, please do.
For that, I might add.
Please do. You can check to see if you're still registered, because it occurred to me, like, could I have been taken off the rolls somehow? And it's always good to make sure that you're still there. I'm active. Oh, God. Set my heart at ease. Yep.
Indeed.
Well, Wink, here along the banks of the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, it is currently, 60 degrees. We're going to, supposed to go up to 89 today. So, a little bit cooler than yesterday, 10 degrees cooler than what it was yesterday. It was like a furnace.
Yeah.
And kind of humid here, too. So, so it's getting to a more, relative, pleasurable range.
Right.
And steadily will be decreasing in temperature. And they're saying for Sunday that we're supposed to have showers. don't tell me on Tuesday we're going to have showers on Sunday. Because by Thursday it'll say sunny and dry.
Exactly.
I hate that. They do that just to keep you from, keep getting you to come back.
I guess, yeah.
I'm sure of it. Well, we had a debate last night.
Yes.
Didn't
yes,
we?
Yes.
Well, let's do this because we have a last minute request for some debate analyses, and we might do that and attend to our stories we were going to go with. But let's go to our Jim Hightower break right now.
All right.
And then we'll then go to, I guess, we'll figure out some other break to connect with Chris, and then we'll do that.
Yeah, we got a couple.
So what? So folks, hang on for a few moments. We're going to connect with Yuri. We'll be back in one moment.
Heather Bresch regards herself as a self-made corporate success story. A woman who came out of Hardscrabble, West Virginia, and scrambled to the top as CEO of Mylan, a leading pharmaceutical corporation. As she puts it, there is a work ethic and grit about West Virginia that allows me to help make a difference. Well, yes, grit, hard work, and being the daughter of the state's former governor and current U.S. Senator Joe Manchin III. Take the MBA degree she got from West Virginia University, an academic credential bestowed on her 10 years after she left the school, having completed only about half of the coursework required to get a degree. The state university later conceded that Bresch was awarded the MBA because her father was governor at the time, overseeing the school's budget. It's this sort of ethical grit that Mylan's chief exec has employed to pick the pockets of thousands of vulnerable customers who rely on EpiPen, the life-saving medical treatment for deadly allergies that her corporation monopolizes. She has ruthlessly hiked the price of EpiPen by some 600%, while jacking up her own multimillion-dollar annual pay by nearly 700%. She certainly is helping to make a difference, by helping herself, that is. Bresch's greed has sparked a furious public backlash, but several top advocacy groups for allergy patients are curiously silent about her gouging of EpiPen patients. Why? Perhaps because she has doled out millions of dollars in, quote, partnership grants to them, effectively buying their allegiance. This is Jim Hightower saying, meanwhile, Congress does nothing, for Mylan and Big Pharma are major campaign donors. So you see, it's not grit and the work ethic that makes today's drug makers so rich. It's their unrestrained greed, bribery dollars, and systemic ethic of corruption.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
Powered by Unity Networks. You are listening to networksradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Okay, we're back.
And indeed, we are back, and thank you for sticking with us. We have Yuri on the line. Yuri, welcome to the after show.
Yes.
Greetings all.
Well, we're in the election season. We're getting down. Well, we're way past the playoffs. We're heading for the big showdown. And so these are special times, and it's great to have this special time with you. We here at Networks Radio, we have sort of a text chat thing always going on.
Yes.
And it's sort of live blogging as the events of the day occur. And the debate, of course, took up a lot of that. Now, you reside out of the country. So I always like the idea that somebody who has, fairly detached.
All right, so I'm
viewpoint.
kind of detached in the sense that I'm not an American citizen.
Right.
My wife is an American citizen. My son is an American citizen. And I pay great attention to what happens in America. But yeah, I'm not a voter. However, so last night the debate started, and my wife's watching it on TV, and she comes running towards me. Like, you have to come and join me. You have to see this. You have to see this. And, at the time I was actually watching it on my own computer, but, and that's kind of an indictment of me as a person, but besides the point, I went down, I joined her, and I watched the entire debate, or 98% of the debate with her and my nephew. And I also dragged my son downstairs, who's 10 years old, and I said, you have to see this. You have to see how ridiculous these arguments are. Because he's used to school ground fights. Like, he's used to, the sort of bullshit that happens on a playground. And so he sort of gets Donald Trump. And so we started watching the debate. And as we're going, it's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm just like, wow, holy crap. This is like unprecedented. And, the bottom line is, well, I can sum it up in like one sentence. Trump is like a toddler on a toboggan. He's holding on tight to his ride. His ride is the, raising the hackles of all the racist people in America. He's hiding on tight to that. He's grabbing on. He's going down the hill. He's like riding the wind. He's all about racist attacks, xenophobia, misogynist hullabaloo. The bottom line is Hillary convinced America he was deplorable.
I watched the debate on C-SPAN, so of course, I'm not hearing any running commentary. Though, we play Malloy, and he had, the debate on, and Malloy is making his. But I to be honest, folks, I even turned Malloy down because I just wanted to get somewhat of an unfiltered, raw, as if I'm in the auditorium experience. Now, for better or worse, our elections have turned into a kind of, well, I wish I could call it something exalted as a Greek tragedy, but it's almost like an old vaudeville show. You got the slap and the punch and Judy part, you got the tap dance, right? But now it's also has elements of professional wrestling, which is an exalted form of the schoolyard bully, and the kids finally standing up to the bully.
That's an interesting portrayal, because like Rowdy Roddy Piper, like if he was still alive today, I think he would be like 100% Hillary.
Yep.
And in my opinion, he's the greatest entertainer in professional wrestling that has ever existed.
I was a big Piper fan. So.
Oh, that man, like, he was a consummate entertainer. Wonderful guy, honest person, just really interesting. Yeah.
Now, I bring up the idea of theater, the schoolyard bully dynamic, professional wrestling. because there was so much in terms of image that's involved in these, well, for lack of a better term, spectacle. It's hard for me to call them a debate, except if you had it as if,
Okay, so think about it in this way, Justice. From my son's point of view, he's like 10, going on 11, and this is professional wrestling. It's no different.
Yep.
Right? From his point of view, it's no different from that. Politics is like professional wrestling. And
I'm sorry, go on.
And Hillary, I mean, my God, she body slammed him left, right, and center. She jumped from the post and, like, she did everything you could imagine to Trump. And honestly, Trump didn't have anything in return. He was, like, trying to use his rally speech against her, and it backfired big time. He is unable to debate in real time.
It's hard for me that some of the pundits afterwards were, speaking in tones of like, well, there's a lot of people out there who don't know Trump. And this was the first time that they were able to see him. Well, I would take exception to that in one sense, and I'm agreeing with you on what you're saying too. And that is, he has a fairly long and storied TV history already with a demographic of people that watch those kinds of shows.
Yeah.
I mean, the hee-haw crowd watched Apprentice too.
Yeah.
But that's all, they may think that was real. And so he's kind of playing off of that TV persona and put it on steroids, I guess. But I think that when people, well, let me put it this way, as the detached observer. Trump exuded nothing that was presidential that would make you feel confident that he would be able to do the rational thing.
All right. So this morning, markets rallied. They were happy that Hillary had kicked Trump's ass in the debate. Markets went way the hell up. And they've since wavered, but the bottom line is that the initial response to the debate on the markets this morning was they all went, oh, thank God Hillary's going to win. We don't have to worry about the various vagaries of Trump because nobody can predict that guy. And that's the problem with Trump. Nobody can predict that guy. He's he might be attacking a lesbian one moment, he'll be attacking a housemaid the next, and he'll be attacking whoever he's talking to the next moment.
Well, this is something in retrospect, too, because in the analysis afterwards, they were trying to count up, maybe small moments where Trump might have won, a point. And they kept talking about trade. But the only points that he was making about trade really was when he was interrupting Hillary. And so it occurred to me that it's almost like an apologetic aspect. Well, we have to give this guy a little bit of gravitas because we still got a horse race going on here. I was wondering if that's...
All right, so let's talk about the media and their need for a horse race. Right? The entire media, I'm talking CNN, NBC, CBS, all of the regular media, mainstream media, they need a horse race. That's what drives ratings. And so that's why all of them have been saying, oh, this is close, this is close. And the national polls have tightened. And when you speak to anyone that's in the know, like Nate Silver or the internal campaign folks from Hillary's camp or any other people, they all say, the race isn't even close. Hillary's already won this.
Now, I will say that really the consensus across the board, I mean, even Lewandowski today admitted, Trump lost the debate. But so I will say that, the message that got across was that Hillary swept the floor with him. But there was these tiny moments, and this is what I want to talk about. This may be out of your realm of expertise, but I want to talk about trade, because they said that was his strong point. But how can the markets rally around Hillary if he's such a guru on trade?
Goodness.
That might be out of your wheelhouse, but I just
no, it's not out of my wheelhouse. It's a complex topic, though, and it's a hard one to distill into a soundbite.
Okay.
So the whole trade problem is, it's basically globalization. Right. And so there's lots of people in lots of other countries that are willing to work at lower wages than America. And if you allow them to freely move their countries over to those places with no tax consequences, they will move there and take advantage of low-cost workers. That's what trade is all about. I mean, there's the trade in terms of goods that goes on between various countries, but what Trump's really concerned about, and Hillary is as well, is trade of working people,
right,
and jobs, in particular jobs that move from one country to another because of tax advantages or business advantages.
Well, but then let's get back to, I guess, this macro thing about this. Because these are conflicting messages that I'm hearing. On the one hand, he talks about trade and our jobs leaking to another country, and he's going to stop that. And yet, he profits tremendously, but he profits by doing the exact thing that he says that he's going to stop. And then, of course, his argument will be, it's the law, and there's nothing to stop me, and I'm just following the law. And then people will say, oh, great, he's going to bring back jobs. But then he also says, but I'm going to get rid of regulation that would stop me from doing what I've always been doing and making a lot of money. So I try to bring this up to people. I got to tell you, I don't really know very many who are on the fence.
All right. So Trump just says whatever at any time. He doesn't live it. He doesn't actually do it. So, for example, Trump has properties all around the world. He's got lots of properties in Asia and in Europe, including Scotland, the famous golf course that he's been in many disputes with over all kinds of stuff. The bottom line is Trump stiffs the people that works for him. He's out for himself, and he doesn't really care about, how well the majority of people are doing. Like, if Trump is elected, it's going to be like Idiocracy. You know the movie?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, it's going to be like Idiocracy. Like, that is going to be the life of America, right, in my opinion, my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Now, global trade, let's talk seriously about that. Yes, global trade agreements need to have a whole load of provisions that protect certain sectors of the economy. And the reason I say that is because when a sector is completely unregulated outside, I'm going to speak on behalf of the United States in this argument.
Okay.
So, for the U.S. case, farming. Let's talk farming. So agriculture, there's all kinds of countries around the world where, etc. So, and the U.S. has had this farm subsidy bill has distorted the market, frankly. And so the current U.S. situation is very favorable for corporate farming versus private farming. And when they're up against the world, everything is distorted. The U.S. rules do not match up with the foreign rules. There's not a level playing field because people are not playing by the same game. So it's going to take, to level out the entire playing field on trade, you have to level out all of the subsidies, internal subsidies, and match them to the external subsidies and get on a level playing field. And until you have a level playing field, there's no equal competition.
And so, in spite of all these fears, the market, and I got to tell you, the market isn't just, some conscious entity. I mean, it's responding to a lot of individuals who are making small decisions, right? So, but the market's responded favorably to, I don't want to say Hillary's performance, but God, she looked presidential.
I mean, the bottom line was, in my opinion, in the debates last night, Hillary sort of said, yes, I can be president, and Donald basically failed to say the same.
Well, in just the moments that we have left here, there's been some floating of the idea that, and Giuliani floated it in the spin room, that maybe there won't be any more debates. What is your prediction on that?
That's a very interesting topic. I can see why Donald would be afraid of further debates with Hillary after last night. I think he's gonna try, but the thing is, in my opinion, that Donald never intended to be president. He never wanted to be president. This is his graceful out. I got beat in the debates.
We'll see. Sometimes a movement even sweeps up its leader, and then they're along for the ride and they can't stop it. But that's just in this reporter's opinion. Hey, Yuri, we got to have you back.
Well, thanks for having me.
Okay. All right.
Yes, we need to get Yuri back here.
We're going to go to another Jim Hightower break, and thank you, Yuri, for being with us today, and we'll visit with you real soon.
Take care. Good night.
Okay. Good day. Yeah, it's daytime somewhere in the world. All right, let's get to another Jim Hightower break. We'll connect with Chris, go through the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Codes community calendar, of course, and then our conversation about Kobach facing a contempt hearing. Why? And some more debate analysis. You're listening to the After Show on Netroots Radio with Wink and Justice, and we will be right back.
The media establishment has labeled Donald Trump a populist, endorsing his absurd assertion that while he might be a billionaire, he'll be our billionaire, fighting for us commoners. I'm not telling anyone how to vote, and I certainly understand the inclination to grab the biggest stick you can find to whack the bejesus out of those political and corporate elites holding you and your family down. And Trump has sold himself as the biggest, baddest stick around. But I am here to say, don't be a sucker. There's not a single populist muscle in Donnie's whole plutocratic body. He'll sell out wage earners, small business people, and anyone else to serve his own needs or whims, as his lifelong record, as opposed to his recent rhetoric, reveals. Donnie learned to be self-serving from his father, Fred, who became a millionaire by getting federal housing subsidies to build apartment buildings in New York City. Then, as landlord, he flagrantly discriminated against black people trying to rent an apartment. One of Fred's tenants was none other than Woody Guthrie, who was so appalled by Daddy Trump's greed and racism that he wrote songs denouncing him. The Donald not only inherited Fred's fortune, but also his business ethics, including engaging in wage theft, outsourcing his expensive Trump-branded products to such low-wage countries as China and Vietnam, and illegally using and underpaying undocumented immigrants to build his luxury projects. Also, he's been sued hundreds of times for stiffing cabinet makers, plumbers, and other small business suppliers. This is Jim Hightower saying Donald J. Trump is a swaggering son of privilege who has never been on the side of working people and most certainly would not be a populist president. To the contrary, in his heart, mind, and his whole being, he's nothing but a Trumpist of, by, and for himself.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
Powered by Unity Networks. You are listening to networksradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
With us, this is the After Show with Wink and Justice. Justice here along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the West Coast. Wink is in upstate New York, 21 on the East Coast. Chris Reeves is in the vast plains of the Midwest, and that's in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And our crew are the ethereal creatures who reside in the cloud, whose advanced intergalactic technical abilities allow Netroots Radio, and thus by extension the After Show, to span the globe, this solar system, way past the Kuiper Belt, and the greater universe, and if there is a beyond that too.
Yeah.
All right. Today's Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community Calendar is facilitated by True Blue Majority, and the question is, do you know any undecided voters? And do you Wink?
I haven't come across any, I don't think.
I actually know people have strong opinions about it.
It's pretty much the way it's going this year, yeah.
Undecided at this point. But it could be just part of my confirmation bias, too. You know, you never know. You got to consider that.
There you go.
Just a reminder, the Daily Coast Asheville Cossacks will be meeting up on Monday, October 24th between 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. in Asheville at a restaurant to be determined, as they get ready with helping Reverend Barber and the early voting campaign that's going on there. So stay tuned for that, and you can go to the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community Diary and click the links and add your name, and that is your Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community Calendar for the 27th of September.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my God, even though I don't want to, I smell pumpkin spice in the air.
Oh, indeed.
Speaking of pumpkin spice, welcome back, Chris. You know, you have a diary today that's so timely. Chris Kobach, our favorite, whatever he is, I don't know, national gadfly, is facing a contempt hearing for violating a court order. And I think I know what court order that is. Why don't you fill us in?
Okay, so the state of Kansas was given a court order to break apart what they call two-tier voting. Now, in the state, two-tier voting means that if you register to vote, you have to fill out a separate form with all this extra information in order to vote in state elections. That's state house, state senate, governor, attorney general, any of those kind of races, okay? Now, in a presidential year, the only thing that comes up is state house and state senate, and state senate is the one that lines up with a presidential year. But it's one of those kind of things that, those races would be off limits to them. Well, a federal judge in Washington, D.C. ordered the state of Kansas to comply with the Federal Motor Voter Act and to allow people to register to vote and be registered pretty universally. You fill out the form, you're registered to vote. the concern is that several voters are finding the information that they're being presented with very confusing. So we have a website called My Voter Info at the state that allows you to look up your voter registration status. And what people are finding is they look up their status and it says both active and suspended. Well, that's pretty confusing. The state has offered multiple reasons for this, but in the end, I've had to tell this to several people today, and they'll say, well, there's a reason for that, it's this and that. That's not really satisfactory to a voter. It's still very confusing for a voter. And in the end, that's the only part that matters, is whether or not a voter is, can make sense of this or not. And if they can't, then, it's no good. What we've done is I went back and looked up some of the registration status for individuals who have complained about this issue and have found that they have a case. There are several instances where voters who thought that they were registered have not been registered. We had an instance of a person in McPherson County who tried to register after the federal court ruling via the Federal Motor Voter Act and was found, received a letter that said, hey, you're not registered to vote because this isn't good enough. Well, that flies in the face of the court order. So on Friday, there will be a hearing to determine whether or not Kobach is significantly complying with the court order, and if he is not, then he is to be held in contempt. That's, it's hard to think of any better phrase than it's just not very good. It's not the way the state is supposed to run. But the question is whether or not Kobach can explain this away. Can he come up with some method to say, oh, there's a reason why it's this confusing.
Well, he's already been embroiled in printing snafus on pamphlets and voter registrations and whatnot. Now, am I understanding correctly? This is an online, because I woke up the other day in a sweat thinking, what if I'm not registered? Because I was expecting to get some political material in the mail. I just haven't gotten it yet. And I got online here in Oregon just to make sure that I wasn't taken off the rolls for whatever reason. And it says active, all the boxes that prove that I'm there, and I'll be getting the next pamphlet. They even told me when I'd be getting my next pamphlet. So this is an online request, and something is untoward. I mean, this is very confusing. Status,
it's
active,
one where voters
reason
go to
suspended.
Voters go to a website to look up whether or not they are registered to vote, and it says active and suspended. Well, if you're a voter, how do you interpret that? Do you interpret that to say, hey, I can vote, or do you take the part about suspended seriously and say, maybe I can't vote? And that level of confusion.
Workers have what if they get a sheet? Oh, well, these people are suspended because it's it doesn't seem to just be the onus on the voter. What if a voter shows up and some poll worker has a tabulated sheet and says all it says is reason suspended.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, do poll workers know all this information? Yes, we found election officers who are pretty well aware and they're briefed on it. But that doesn't mean if I'm just a standard poll worker, especially in rural communities or high Hispanic communities, that I'm going to be completely prepared to understand that the rules aren't really what they say that they are. Oh, it's okay that it says online you're suspended because you're not suspended. Whereas in another case, it says you're suspended, you really are suspended. The greater problem with this is the state of Kansas does have a way to cover this. You see what they're saying is this doesn't mean you're suspended, it just means you've been inactive. Well, that's a pretty preposterous claim because the state does have a classification, inactive. If the problem with these voters was that their registration was inactive, they could just change their online status to inactive. But the fact that it's not changing to that, that's a problem. That's a great way to confuse voters. How do people take that? I mean, what is it? Is it anything that will ever make sense to them as, this is a way to understand what's actually going on, and I don't know.
Now, this may be too granular, and you're not capable of answering it. But when did this anomaly start popping up, or reportage of it? Just recently, or after the court order? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, no. You're fine. I'm thinking for a second. Oh. Some questions are kind of tricky.
Okay.
When did this really
not
start?
Able to answer for whatever reason.
No. It's one where, when did this really start? Well, it depends on whose argument you buy into. So if you buy into the argument of the Secretary of State, this is an issue that is propped up by people who are making something out of nothing. If you, on the other hand, tend to believe, like I do, that disenfranchising 20-plus thousand voters because you created an alternative voting scheme as a problem, then this really started about a year and a half ago when we created what was called dual-track voting in Kansas. So the moment that you said you had to register to vote basically twice in Kansas if you wanted to vote both in the federal and the state elections, that's really when you started to create a whole lot of confusion, because the majority of voters in Kansas didn't realize that this had been created, and for people who had voted in prior elections, it didn't impact them. So it was only people who were first-time registered who came to realize that if they registered by the federal form, that wasn't good enough. They had to register to vote a second time in order to vote in state elections, and the majority of Kansas still don't know that. And that's what the federal court order was designed to stop, to say you couldn't do it that way. And so this is one where we've tried to roll it back to something that most Kansans will just understand. You register once and you're done, and it ends the confusion of, oh, you've got to register to vote twice. Chris Kobach said that's not confusing. Most people understood that system pretty well. They understood why you had to register twice. And again, he thinks it's not an issue. But most advocates, including the ACLU and others, kind of look at it and say, how many people think you have to do the same thing twice in order to vote once? Well,
as we get closer to Election Day, I mean, there's always to ever enact these reforms, the excuse to delay it is that, well, it's too close to the election, it'll cause too much confusion. Our confusion, if we write it, will cause too much confusion, so we can't do it before the election. That's been a cavalier attitude for, I got to tell you, as long as I've lived. I presume Kobach's just falling back on this, but things are a little bit more serious. Can this be rectified before Election Day?
We hope it can be rectified. In fact, he's under a court order, which didn't happen. To give you an idea of how fast this happened, the state of Kansas asked for stays like other states, and it took the court one day. There was literally no waiting. Before the weekend, we had a ruling out of the federal court that basically said no. It may have been a little bit longer than a day, but it was very fast. The turnaround that said, hey, no stays, you just got to fix this. And the question now isn't whether or not we have to fix it. We know we have to fix it. We have a federal ruling on the issue. The question is whether or not Chris Kobach is compliant with the court. And if he's not, then is he in contempt of court? And that's the hearing on Friday. The hearing on Friday isn't about, hey, let's relook at this ruling. The hearing on Friday is a Secretary of State in contempt of court? And what I tried to show in a diary this morning is that the way the evidence looks, it's pretty damning to the case that he has done very little to stop voter confusion. If you're a voter, and I've again had election officers explain this to me this morning, oh, there's a reason for that, there's a reason for that. That doesn't matter. If you're a voter, is the system still confusing? Yes, it's very confusing. Yeah. And as long as you keep putting up documents that say, oh, you're suspended and active at the same time, which does a voter take seriously? Well, that seems to fly in the face of the federal court ruling, which said you're supposed to try to eliminate these confusions and just get people registered.
Now, if I was a reporter and I had a contempt charge from a judge hanging over my head. I pretty much expect to be sitting in a jail cell for a while until something resolved itself. Does this court order have that kind of teeth? Is there implied immunity involved in this? What's up on that front?
Oh, well, does the court have teeth? Can they do something? There are a lot of people.
Is he going to send an aide, or is he going to show up in court?
No, he has to show up. Okay. It's one where he can't send an aide because he is the one being potentially charged with contempt. So,
can they put him in handcuffs and take him to a holding cell until he relents?
I don't know. I've actually asked that question of a couple people this morning, and we're not sure on that. There are people who would love to see that happen. It's far more likely that the feds could invoke other standards to help govern Kansas electoral stand. And that would be really interesting if we have this come down to where, they say, hey, we've got to have an outside observer, make sure you follow the damn law. And that's not an impossibility. That absolutely could happen.
Well, before we get hot and heavy into the debate, because there's a theme here, and I want to bring up Brownback quelching a report, and I'd like to talk about that briefly before we go into the debate. But let me just preface it that there's been a theme about just thumbing people's noses at the conventions of how our representative democracy and republic works. This contempt hearing is the same as Trump last night saying, that civil rights housing lawsuit that was brought by the Nixon administration, I want to remind folks about, was from a compromised judge or whatever. So Trump was throwing shade and disrespecting a major institution, throwing doubt on a federal court's decision. And Kobach's actions are the similar way. Let's talk a little bit about Brownback quelching this, getting rid of this report that shows that his Tea Party policies are an utter failure in Kansas. How much news is that in the state?
Well, so I haven't covered this yet because it's one where it's still going back and forth in the State House. We're not sure how this is going to end up shaking out. And so I don't want to say too much just yet. But sure. The state normally offers what's called a quarterly economic report, which gives an assessment of the current track of Kansas as far as the economic indicators, which include not just jobs, but investment, taxes paid, revenue in, revenue out. All those kind of things are figured in, income tax paid. And it gives a status of the current state, finances. Well, the governor has decided to not issue one for this quarter. And there's been some back and forth over whether or not this is just a technical issue and it will happen, or whether it's I just decided not to do it. And there's some back and forth on how this will shake out. But it is concerning. One of the things that we're seeing, I think for a lot of people have looked, and I know I followed Kansas for years and Missouri, is they look at these states and they say, I live in a blue state or whatever, why should I care? Well, if you're watching Trump or you're watching the National Republicans, this is exactly what they are trying to bring to the national political scene. I mean, Trump just appointed Brownback to another council. He's now his lead on his Catholic outreach council. So you're having Trump and Brownback and Kobach, who are on multiple panels on the National Republican Party, and you're sitting and saying, okay, this is the policy that they want to bring to the national government. And Trump, he got hammered with it over his taxes last night, but that lack of transparency, that lack of interest in showing your cards isn't something that's just unique to Trump. It's something that's happening in state houses, especially in these Republican state houses, where we're keeping people in the dark as to what the heck is going on in their state. Think of the failure of Kansas to issue this report as about the same as the presidential candidate not giving over his tax returns. Nobody knows what's in there. It could be wildly different from last quarter, or it could be the same. We don't know, but the public has a right to know. And that's what's concerning about this line that's coming within the Republican Party that basically says, hey, this is acceptable. We're okay to keep people in the dark about the real facts of what the hell is going on.
Now, qualifying the fact that, since, for lack of a better term for ourselves, we're kind of wonkish about the campaign. And so we may be hearing more from people who are like-minded. Okay, so accounting for confirmation bias. Reports are that this is not only the largest audience to view a presidential debate, but one of the largest audiences, ever in any kind of event. Are people energized? Were they interested in seeing this debate? Were people watching it in diners? Were they talking about it, in the letter to the editor this morning? How is it there?
Well, I got to tell you, I think this debate, and I judge from my feeds as well as people I know, I don't think that this was one where a lot of Hillary voters went, oh, I suddenly don't like her. And I don't think Trump took a huge hit amongst his own people, but I think for Trump it was pretty damaging for the people who are undecided yet. I think this is one for Trump. We forget in a presidential race you got to get to 50%, or at least enough to overcome your opponent, and this certainly doesn't help Trump with that. I think that there were a lot of terrible things that Trump said last night. I think it was just not a debate performance. I've done debate at the high school level. I've coached. I sat in and was on a national. I participated in a speech debate team at the college level, mostly on the speech side, and that wasn't really what I would call a debate. Now, the thing that I will tell you that nobody's thinking about, but the part that I think does hurt Trump and hurts him with his base, is the moment where Trump came out and said, oh, you know what, Hillary's right on this gun control, on if you can't fly, you shouldn't be able to buy guns. Right. And when he said we should use stop and frisk to seize guns. Oh, okay, those are two positions where the NRA is virulently opposed. And I have heard from more conservatives this morning who are freaked out about the idea that Donald Trump is taking what they view as strong gun control positions. And that for them is, you may see some conservatives who look at that, and that's the one area where Trump hit his own base in a way where there are some people who may say, I'm done. That doesn't mean that they're a vote for Hillary. It probably means that they'll consider voting for somebody like Gary Johnson.
Right.
But it's a real concern for Trump that not only did he not perform well on the debate on his facts and standards, but where he needed to solidify his own base, I think he did some damage there. I think he hurt himself even on his own conservative issues in a way that we're not really thinking about yet.
These are the pardon me here. These are the miscalculations that I continue to see emanate from the Trump campaign. One is that his idea is that or belief that people will just automatically follow him for whatever reason, and yet there's a lot of gun owners out there that aren't virulent Second Amendment types walking around Walmart with high capacity weaponry strapped to themselves.
Right.
And really what I heard when he talks about stop and frisk, that it appeals to that part of the white supremacist base that says, yeah, well, not us, he means them. But to the people who are, and we'll just call them undecided, or people who haven't had as much exposure to Trump, which is hard for me to believe because he's been a commodity for so long. But regardless, they probably never saw him in such an intimate way, we'll say. And they don't think stop and frisk means others. It means all of us, everybody, me.
Right.
And that's a miscalculation on his part.
It's a huge miscalculation. It's a huge miscalculation, and it's one where they take that stuff. The NRA has convinced people that any gun regulation is horrible gun regulation. So when Trump came out last night in favor of two significant policies that Hillary has put forward, it's going to be one where the NRA voters are going to go, wait a second, what the heck is this? This isn't what we thought we were getting in a
this
candidacy.
I don't mean to jump around too much because I want to get back to another point, but say people are offended by that. Does a Gary Johnson vote peel from Trump or peel from Hillary? I mean, they're going to peel, but does Hillary get hurt worse in this?
Well, I think in that case it would be one where that would probably hurt Trump more. It's just one where I think the thing is a lot of those people had their minds made up. I think it was just one where hearing the Republican presidential candidate come out in favor of multiple forms of gun control last night was probably difficult for some of that group, who hadn't expected that, weren't really, that's their issue. There are a lot of people who vote single line issues. And so to hear someone say, hey, we'll deploy stop and frisk to seize weapons, well, you've basically advocated for a police force that can come and seize weapons off of people who can open carry and concealed carry. And that's something that I can't even think of a Democrat who has advocated that position. That's a really harsh line for people who are gun rights advocates to say, hey, it's okay to, let's empower the police to come and without a warrant, without probable cause, to just come and strip you of your weapons. And yet he said it out loud because he had to one up. That was really the whole thing last night, is I've got to one up you. And I think the moment that it was said, there were quite a few people, at least within the feeds that I monitor, who basically said, where the hell did this come from? How did we get on this topic? Where are we at? And I think that does hurt him with quite a few of the conservative voters, especially the voters who are significant gun rights advocates, who are going to want an explanation for, where did this come from, and why is this suddenly now an okay stance for someone who had just recently lobbied for the NRA endorsement, to offer two proposals that would be wildly opposed by the NRA.
Let me ask you real quick as we sum up here. You mentioned that you've been in debates, you've taught debate, coached debates. I've done the same. I was always taught that, especially on a national stage like this, that when you're communicating, you're not really communicating with your opponent, you're communicating with the American people. Mm-hmm. And so the extreme of that is that politicians then become so utterly gracious to the point of being saccharine, right? Mm-hmm. But that's going to play better, I think, in Kansas than the interruptive, rude ungraciousness, which was basically flipping a middle finger to the American people. Did that offend, or is that going to be overlooked?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that will also come up. He interrupted her 91 times, at least according to the MSNBC count, and he spoke for a considerably longer amount of time. And I think that won't go unnoticed, especially by women in the audience who will say, look, this is a woman who found herself being repeatedly talked over, interrupted, mansplained to, as they say. And it was just one where, in many of the cases where he did it, it wasn't because he had a great point. It was just because he wanted to control the conversation. And I think, and this is something pretty critical. There's a level where, we even as progressives can say, oh, you're mansplaining, et cetera, to me. And people will say, well, if it was one where it added something significant to the conversation and then it went back to the other person, it's somewhat forgivable because we'll say, oh, that was an interjection of a conversation. But when you interrupt for the sole purpose of interrupting the other person to basically exert privilege of, hey, my voice matters more, that's the textbook definition of mansplaining. You're not offering anything new to the conversation. Someone, a great friend, she explained it to me this way. And she said, if I'm making cake and in the middle of it, her partner turns to her and says, "Oh crap, I really want walnuts, add walnuts." And then they went back to doing what they were doing. She wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm offended." That was a constructive amount of conversation. Whereas if she's in the middle of, doing an oil change and he pulls her out and says, "Well, let me explain to you how I've always done this," and it contributes nothing to the action at hand, then that's mansplaining. That's the heart of it. And Trump did a ton of it. And I think it came off as condescending. It came off as rude. And it also got worse as the night went on, where it looked like he got more and more tired. And for a candidate who has complained about the health of his opponent, Trump spent the entire night wheezing and sniffling and looking sickly, whereas Hillary had a constant, I'm going to stare right at the camera. I look healthy. I'm not drinking tons of water. And it made you wonder, Howard Dean made his assertion, but it made you wonder, is Trump the candidate who is battling sickness? I don't know, but he didn't look good. And I think the longer it went on, the worse it got for his campaign. I don't think it converts a ton of his voters outside of, I think he's going to have to shore up some of the gun rights voters. But I think it really puts a hard ceiling on how many voters he can bring in. In polling, Trump has never managed to break over 44. I think that ceiling is starting to really harden, and now it's going to be a difference between Trump stuck 43, 44, how much do the third parties get, and where does Hillary end up?
We had Yuri on for the top half. I asked him as a final question, and I'm going to ask you. Giuliani floated the idea, no more debates. What's your prediction? More debates or no?
If you're Trump, I think it's tempting to say no more debates, because last night's debate was pretty freeform. He could respond however he wanted. When we get to a town hall debate where he's got to respond directly to the questions of the audience, that's going to be if he has this level of preparedness, that's going to be really difficult, because people in the audience will ask specific granular questions that they want specific answers to. And from the look of last night, Trump is just not prepared to do that. And this was the format last night that should have worked most to his advantage of all the debates, whereas the town hall is the one that is the worst for him. And I think after last night's performance, there's got to be a lot of questions of how's this going to work out for us. I can't see him backing away from debates. I think he ends up doing it, but I'm betting that there's a real conversation going on in his campaign as to, can we really survive, a debate with the people where we look bad. I think that if he bolts from the debate, though, I think it dooms his campaign too. So I think it's a darned if you do, darned if you don't.
Well, GW did really terrible in his first debate. Romney did really terrible in his first debate. They both rallied their second debates. I didn't think they won by great margins, but the consensus was they had. So I think that you may see, I don't know. He's so easily baited. I'm sorry, Chris. We could go on. We're just going to have to talk about this and more next week.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. Thanks, Chris. Well, we better bug out of here, folks. Continue listening to Netroots Radio 24/7, 365. Why? Well, because who loves you, baby? Okay, Wink. I will see you on the other side.
All right. We're out.